Okay, this is Mr. Kaz here, and if I could situate this presentation, it's kind of picking up where we left off, relating to the mother cultures of the Americas and the great empires of the Americas that met the Europeans in the 1500s. So we're calling this New World Exchanges, and it's a combination of things. It's going to talk about the people of the Americas, the European arrival, and the Columbian Exchange, an important concept that we want you to be familiar with. So, the mother cultures, this is going to be a recap of what we did on Wednesday in small group for most of you: the Olmec, the Chavan, and the Nazca. Olmec, of course, were based in southern Mexico. They had numerous trade routes. They engaged in temple building, which has since been excavated, and they were an important influence on the Aztec and the Maya. Chavan, differently, were based in South America in the Andes Mountains, and they had also temple building and priest king rule, and they were a big influence on the Inca civilization. The Nazca were based in southern Peru as well as kind of the Chavan were. They were known for the Nazca lines as well as these very distinct trophy heads that was a part of their culture. And this is the location of where the Olmecs were, in what would be modern day South Central Mexico, and of course the Chavan and the Nazca were based in South America. This is a timeline to just kind of compare for you the chronology of when the Olmecs existed versus when the Aztec and the Maya existed, which we're going to be getting into in a moment. So the Maya, the Aztec, and the Inca were the three great empires of Meso and South America. These are the ones that, with exception to the Maya, were around when the Europeans arrived. The Maya were kind of a precursor. They were largely tapped out as a civilization by the time the Europeans arrived, but they were based in southern Mexico. They were never consistently and fully integrated as a unified state. They constructed temples and city states, like if you look over in the picture on the right, this is the Mayan city of Tikal. They had an advanced calendar, which we talked about in lab, and a social class system. One new thing I wanted to add in is the Mayans practice which was called slash and burn agriculture. The slash and burn agriculture was highly efficient and sustainable for people who were based in the equatorial regions of southern Mexico, because it allowed them to chop down portions of the jungle as well as burn it to the ground and create a new and rich soil composite. And they were able to keep doing this, and by the time they got back to where they started, the tropical foliage had regrown. So, as I said, it's very sustainable. The Aztec, also based in southern Mexico, a little bit further north than the Maya were. They were a warrior society. They built their power on conquest, taxation of conquered people, and the capturing of slaves for labor. They were productive farmers, as you read in lab. They had those floating chinampa gardens, which allowed them to be very productive food producers. They had a religion that they believed demanded human sacrifices, blood sacrifices, as you read about. And the Inca, based in South America, unlike the previous two in the Andes Mountains, they built a vast empire linked through roads and bridges. The people of the Inca, they basically paid their taxes with their labor, and it was to different people. They worked for the religious institutions, the government, but also for themselves. And they communicated over this vast distance of empire through those knotted string-colored cords called quipus, and you read about that in the Thursday reading as well. So again, the purpose of this was to just recap and maybe analyze a little bit closer those empires of the Americas. There's the Maya, the Aztecs, and what you see here is an artist rendition of the Aztec Empire. This was done by the Mexican artist in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s. His name was Diego Rivera, and he captured what the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan would have looked like at the time of the Spanish arrival in the 1500s. And it's a really impressive picture. It shows you the depth and richness of their civilization. In large group, we read this account of what the Aztecs looked like at the time of the Spanish arrival and, unfortunately for them, the Aztecs' destruction. And I'd like you to read through this and see just how impressed the Spanish were at the scale and vastness and beauty of this civilization. That is an Inca bridge. that they used to stretch across and connect the um, chasms of the Andes Mountains. And that's the Inca civilization map. Make sure you watch this clip here if you weren't in large group, and be able to talk about the significance of corn and potatoes to the native peoples of the Americas. So moving on here, I want to provide you some brief context, and we're going to pick up on this in Tuesday large group, of what the situation was in Europe at the time of the European arrival in the Americas. What were the great kingdoms of Europe doing in the late 1400s and early 1500s? Well, Spain, France, and England, the two what will become nation states, were actually three relatively newly unified kingdoms. They recently unified in the late 1400s. Spain had recently finally kicked out Islamic armies that had occupied much of southern Spain at the time, and Spain was really only a collection of several kingdoms that came together. France had only recently expelled the English during a period of time in European history called the Hundred Years' War. And England itself is still England. It's not even Britain. It hasn't really unified with Scotland. That won't come along until the 1700s. Europeans are deeply looking for trade routes to Asia. The Islamic conquest of the Middle East and North Africa, something we're going to talk about second semester, had cut off or at least limited land routes to Asia for Europeans. So there's a desperation there. The Spanish are in a real bind because the Portuguese have most of the trade routes going around the tip of Africa if you were trying to sail to Asia, places like India. So that's one of the reasons they're able to take a gamble on someone like Columbus, who offers an alternative way. One big way to think about this is through what is called the three G's: God, glory, and gold. God being one explanation for why Europeans chose to come to the Americas, the chance to spread Christianity, and it was seen as a good Christian duty to do so. And some people are going to be motivated by that. Others are going to be motivated more by material things, the chance for glory, the chance to excel oneself socially and through the fame of conquest and the heroism that goes along with that back in the mother country. But probably the most overriding and universal hope and motivation for conquest is going to be gold. Gold makes the world go round for these European nation states. If a monarch has a gold supply in their treasury, they're able to fight wars to extend their realm. There is no modern financial system. You can't fight long wars of conquest financed on debts and deficits. You have to have gold in your treasury. So monarchies are going to be looking for that. This is a map of kind of what Europe looks like around the time of Columbus. Spain, France, and England, recently unified kingdoms. The Holy Roman Empire, while it looks imposing, is actually a collection of many different groups. So where did the Europeans arrive and settle? Take a close look at this map if you weren't in large group. It may be familiar to you. The Spanish are going to largely set up shop in the Caribbean, which will become very valuable territory, but they're also going to move on to places like Mexico and the southwest United States. A lot of gold and silver will be taken out of Mexico and sent back to Spain. They're also going to claim vast stretches of South America. The Portuguese are going to set up plantations and systems of settlement in what would be modern-day Brazil, coastal Brazil. The Dutch, the French, and the English are going to compete for much of North America. The Dutch are going to kind of get pushed out of North America, but the French are going to have a presence in the interior, the Great Lakes, the St. Lawrence Valley, and the English are going to have settlements along the east coast of the United States, the forerunner to the 13 colonies. Everybody, that is Europeans, are going to fight over the Caribbean sugar islands because sugar is extremely valuable. Finally, the final concept I want you to be aware of, something called what historians call the Columbian Exchange. The Columbian Exchange, it's a concept to describe the collision of plants, animals, people, and disease between the Americas and what is called Afro-Eurasia, Europe, Africa, and Asia, common plants, diseases, and animals to this region. So that's the name for this collision and exchange of things. But what are the impacts and what are the consequences? That's what I want you to be aware of. The big statistic of the Columbian Exchange is the staggering death of the Native American populations after 1492, after Columbus, the Spanish, and others start arriving. Because the Native Americans lack immunities to new diseases, in particular smallpox and influenza, but also others, they were wiped out in large numbers. It's estimated within the first century to 2 centuries of conquest by the Europeans, 90% of the Native Americans will die out, largely of disease. Many European plants are going to thrive in the Americas. Things like sugar and coffee and various fruits are going to really do quite well in the various environments. Others will not do as well, and some will take a while to catch on. But a big result for the Europeans is that calorie-dense foods like corn and potatoes are going to go back to Europe, and it's going to actually boost the population of Europe. Poor people in the kingdoms of France and England and Spain and Central Europe eventually are going to get access to those, and it's going to allow basically more calories to circulate within a European diet. It's going to become less bland. I urge you to take a look at this map here closely. It will tell you what kind of plants, animals, and diseases are going from the Americas to Europe and Europe to the Americas. Pay particular attention to the livestock. This is something a lot of people may not recognize or be aware of. The Americas have almost no large livestock, beasts of burden, if you will. Cattle, sheep, pigs, horses, goats, that's all going to go from Afro-Eurasia to the Americas. Also pay attention to disease because of its consequence. Europeans are going to send smallpox, influenza, typhus, malaria, whooping cough to the Americas, and that's going to play a key role in shaping the population. Final task for you as we wrap up here, watch this film clip and answer the question of how the arrival of the horse had an impact on the Americas.